Mauricio Pochettino is the new Chelsea manager. At long last, that was announced yesterday, Bank Holiday Monday here in the UK. Good time to sneak out some bad news. Is it bad news for Chelsea, Jonathan Johnson, or is it bad news for Mauricio Pochettino? Or is it good news for everyone?
I'm not going to say necessarily it's good news for everyone. It's a great appointment for Chelsea, especially considering that they're out of European competition. It's a risky move from Pochettino, given that his legacy now depends upon how he does at Stamford Bridge. Let's face it, his time with PSG was not a success. He won't be judged solely on that because of the high stock that he enjoys from his time in charge of Tottenham Hotspur, but he has forever destroyed that goodwill from the Spurs fans by taking the job for Chelsea, I think. And it is a risk because at the end of the day, I know that there's changes afoot at Chelsea. Bowley's going to be taking a step back and, sort of the more football specific minds are going to be sort of taking over, day-to-day control of the club. But there's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, no European football next season. That is probably actually a good thing, for Pochettino in terms of sort of, getting down to, taking the squad back to basics, because it is a hugely bloated squad. And to be honest, when you bear in mind that they've got Nkunku coming in, we know that they're pushing hard for Ugarte at the moment in midfield. You don't actually think, or you can't see that there's actually too much need for many other, additions to this squad, at least not before you get rid of some players. I think this Chelsea squad is in need of trimming before it is sort of, adding more star name and talent to it. I certainly think they could do with more teeth in attack. We know that Joao Felix won't be staying at Stamford Bridge now, but I feel like Pochettino has a bigger job on his hands in terms of rooting through this group of players and working out who he wants to work with, who he doesn't, than he does in terms of working out, how many more additional dressing rooms need to be built for extra signings.
It's so funny because Stamford Bridge is like one of the most cramped grounds in England. So in COVID times, they had to shrink the press room to make way for the bigger dressing rooms.
Oh, that would have been disastrous for the buffet, though.
Oh, God, it's an absolute disgrace. But you just think, God, if they actually tried to fit all their squad in the dressing room next season, there would be no press room. We'd just have to huddle outside. Some great comments coming in from our excellent listeners and viewers. Ed, 2-year deal shows how Chelsea have been badly burned by the Potter debacle. Very true, and a very good point made by Ed. As Chelsea have been handing out these lifetime contracts, it seems, to some of their expensive young footballers, just 2 years from Mauricio Pochettino does reflect a little bit of caution, and one wonders how much they are a little bit nervous about the years to come. Vic says it's good news. Pochettino needs this challenge to become an elite coach. You are right, Vic, because I tell you, if he makes it through this challenge, no one could dispute his status as an elite coach. I think this is one of the toughest jobs there is in world football. He can't change the expectations of Chelsea fans. He can't make them embrace a rebuild, but a rebuild is exactly what's needed, because the one thing I take issue with on what JJ was saying is, I look at this squad and think it needs an awful lot of work, new recruits. This is a team that hasn't had a good talismanic striker since Diego Costa went AWOL under Antonio Conte. Neither of those goalkeepers, to me, are anywhere near the standard of a top 4 goalkeeper, no matter how much has been spent on them. I'd like to see them get better. If I'm a Chelsea supporter, if I'm on the Chelsea board, I'd like to see them get a better defensive partner for Thiago Silva and the player to eventually replace Thiago Silva. JJ mentioned Ugarte. That's a reminder that midfield needs a bit of youth. Mason Mount, he's going to need replacing. And then you're getting rid of an awful lot of players. I mean, the one I would point out is just look at that logjam on the left flank. Let's assume Pulisic goes. Let's assume Aubameyang goes. You still have Mykhailo Mudryk. You still have Callum Hudson-Odoi. You still have Raheem Sterling. You still have maybe Kai Havertz. Oh, and you're getting Christoph Nkunku. Our producer Des has said in our question there, can Poch get them back into the top 4? Can Poch get them back in the top half, Mike Lahoud?
I think in the top half. I think it's going to be very dependent on if they get a striker and if they can get rid of Kai Havertz. This is a player that, a couple of years ago, scored the game-winning goal under Thomas Tuchel in the Champions League final, but has been on borrowed time. I think if they trim the fat on some of these players that you've named, their biggest transfer policy to be getting a number 9 In the Premier League, if you do not have a number 9 that gets you goals in tough games against the top 6 or 7 teams, you will not be able to compete. Look at some of the teams that are in that position. They found ways to compete and stay competitive, but you have to score goals. You can't draw your way to a top 4 or top 5 finish in the Premier League.
And just to say on that regard, I believe Chelsea went this season without any player making double figures in goals. The first time that's happened in, I think, over 40 years. And considering the number of games they were playing, including Champions League, that is an impressive achievement.